Yeah, we can keep this as informal as you want, basically, because I think the core of what I want to get to today is just like what's the like why of the Sisters of Life, and kind of like the training that you have done, and the like research, quote unquote, that you guys do as an order that kind of like impacts the work that like we have done together, and kind of like like why work with mothers, why do you care about life, why did you enter this order, like what's been fruitful about it. So just to kind of like give like an umbrella glance at the Sisters of Life and the mission, and then get like deeper into the details from there.
Sure.
So maybe a good first question, this is a big one, what is the ethos of the Sisters of Life?
That's wonderful.
And you can, there's like a follow-up with that, like
Sure.
why was it founded and how?
Yes.
And that can be as descriptive or not as you want.
Sure. So I think it might help to tell the story of how we were founded, because I think that informs a lot of who we are and where we're coming from. So John Cardinal O'Connor, he was the Cardinal Archbishop of New York, and he was very, very much just given a very strong sense of the sacredness of every human life, and a great awareness of this, which kind of developed over the course of his life. And he was also very active in the pro-life movement, and recognized that there was a particular attack that was different against vulnerable human life. And this was something that he very much brought into his prayer. And when there are some particular moments where he received graces that he can, even though they weren't right before he founded our order, they were kind of like the foundational graces that led to him realizing the need to have sisters. So one of them was he was traveling, I can't remember the year, but he was in Europe and went to Dachau, the concentration camp there, and while there, reached his hand into the crematoria where the ashes of Jews and Christians and men and women were all intermingled, and he had this profound grace. It overcame him. His response was, "Good God, how could one man do this to another?" And that was something that deeply struck him and deeply, again, formed him in recognizing the sacredness of every human life and realizing that he was called in a particular way to protect and uphold it. And then later, as the pro-life movement was underway, he realized that we're doing a lot, and there's a lot of good hearts and a lot of good souls and a lot of good efforts, but something's missing. He kept getting the sense that something was missing. And he was praying with the gospel scene of the Transfiguration, where Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up the mountain and is transfigured before him. And when they return down the mountain, the rest of the apostles are there, and they're trying to cast a demon out of a young man, and they're unable to. So Jesus comes and is able to cast out the demon, and afterwards the disciples kind of ask him, Lord, why were you able to cast out that demon and not us? And the Lord's response was, this demon can only be cast out by prayer and fasting. And again, in praying with this, Cardinal O'Connor just received the grace of realizing that the spirit of contempt for human life is actually a demon, and that this is a spiritual battle, and that in the pro-life movement, this contempt for human life, this loss of the sense of the sacredness of every human life, and that a spiritual response is needed, and that led him to pray about it led to the inspiration of recognizing the gift of consecrated women in their prayer, and that their whole being, people, it's not so much what we do, but it's who we are. Our existence testifies to the sacredness of every human life, and everything that we are becomes an offering. a spiritual offering for, again, to bring an awareness, and that our fasting and our works, even though often hidden, may give the grace for a woman to choose life. So I start with kind of all of this in the story, because this then informs who we are, and that was something that Cardinal O'Connor would often emphasize, that it's about being a sister of life is about your being over your doing. It's not about like what you do, it's who you are. And he also realized in founding us that we were meant to be a contemplative, active order. So there are some orders that are active, so they're mostly serving, and then there's some orders that are contemplative, where they're mostly given to prayer and fasting. And he realizes that our first work would be prayer and fasting, and then all of our action would flow from that. But first and foremost, that would always be at the heart of us, is that we're a community that fasts and prays on behalf of human life. And our contemplative prayer is the source of everything we do. So it's in gazing upon our Lord in the Eucharist as our spouse, in receiving his love, in loving him in return, and particularly our spirit is Eucharistic, because just like the child in the womb, our Lord in the Eucharist is hidden. He's little. He's often unnoticed or underappreciated, and in our time, he's often desecrated. And Cardinal O'Connor saw a connection between the desecration of life in the womb and a loss of the sense of Jesus' presence in the Eucharist as two things that were not separate, that they were actually deeply connected, which is why we spend, that's why we have a holy hour every day. That's why the heart of everything we do is the Mass, because as we grow in awareness of the hidden presence of our Lord in the Eucharist, and the sacredness of that, and the beauty of that, and how he makes himself little and vulnerable, the more we are aware of the child in the womb, the vulnerability of the mother, the littleness and helplessness and poverty of the mother, and even our own littleness and poverty. We're able to unite our own sufferings, our own shortcomings, as not something that keeps us from God, but actually is right there with him. So all of that is kind of, I'll pause speaking for a while to see if you have any thoughts that go with that, but all of that is really important, because it's the foundation to everything else. So it's not the action first that then flows into our contemplation. The contemplation is the heart, the heartbeat of the Sisters of Life. So
cool. Yeah, that's, I mean, I think that explains so much of the kind of the background of like why you do what you do.
Yeah.
And so in relation to the why the Sisters of Life, why this kind of mission, I mean, there's other questions I have kind of with that, but I'm trying to think of a good order for this. I think maybe if you could speak about like what has been most impactful from your formation. I'm going to break this into two questions. So from your formation, thinking about how that's impacted your like view of, or kind of like interactions with women here, or the way that you see like yourself in relation to the mission of the Sisters of Life personally, and like how that's been fruitful for you. That could be a story, it could be just like an explanation. So I'm breaking this up into two, so it's like that general kind of like how has it been fruitful for you in relation to like living it out, and like like what does that look like, and then we'll kind of go into like the creative respite, like art nights we've been doing.
Sure.
How that formation has like kind of influenced your kind of vision for that, and your working with me on that as like bringing an artist here.
Sure.
So sorry, that's like a long-winded question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, because so I'll start with a little bit about formation, and a story from what does that look like? You know, how do we put flesh on it, and what does that look like in the mission? I can share a story, and then ending with and how do we see that come alive in our art nights? So our formation, you know, I knew it was rather surprising to me when I entered to learn that our formation is prayer. So when we're novices and when we're postulants, we're not being trained to counsel women. We're not being trained to walk with women. We're not being trained like, what is the heart of a pregnant woman, or what do you say, or what do you do, or whatever, or how does this work? You're given this space. It's almost like especially your canonical year of your novitiate, so your first year of a novitiate, you're basically like entering into this space of prayer that's protected, this quiet space where you can really like form deep roots with the Lord, where you can enter more deeply into scripture, you enter more deeply into study, you reduce your contact with like family and friends just a little bit for that period of time, but again, towards being able to really listen to the voice of the Lord and engage in this intimate space of love and prayer. Like, it's all geared toward prayer and entering into deeper relationship with the Lord. And you're actually not given a mission for that reason, because that's actually everything. You know, like, it's the heart of everything. And this comes from the church. Like, every religious community has to have this year of prayer, because the church realizes that, again, as a consecrated religious, your relationship with the Lord is at the heart of it, and everything else will flow from that, or everything else can be taught later, but those deep roots will form you, and for a religious woman, it's this rather mysterious relationship of receiving the call from the Lord to be his bride. So it is kind of like going deep with your spouse, you know, sharing the intimate details, the things that are holding you back, the things that are that might be challenging, but also the joys of discovering the other, discovering the beauty of the Lord, and it's just a space that's created for that. And as Sisters of Life, we wear white veils to remind us that we're brides, but Cardinal O'Connor also wanted us to remember, in other communities, you wear a white veil when you're in formation, and usually when you profess vows, you receive a black veil or a brown veil or a gray veil. But he wanted us to remember we're always in formation. And I would say, like, the prayer is that space of formation, that every day we're going back to the source, and as the Lord is leading us and giving us graces, we are becoming more closely united with him, and in receiving his body and blood in the Eucharist, and in spending time with him and receiving the sacrament of confession, he is actually making himself one with us, so that it's not what we do, but it's actually his presence that we're bringing to others, which is very radical, and nobody in the world talks like this, and it would be crazy if there was no God. You know, like, if you don't believe in a God, everything we do is nuts. You know, like, everything we do is absolutely crazy. But if you believe in a God that has desires to unite himself with the human person, then we become these vessels where we're not diminished in any way, but somehow we're made more alive by his presence within us. And that's what others are receiving from us, and especially as Sisters of Life. It points to, like, this is the great glory of the human person, is that not what you work or what you accomplish, but that you were made to be divinized. You were made to be united with Jesus in a way that's so, like, intimate and mysterious and beyond anything we could have ever asked for ourselves, and that this God is loving and merciful, but it takes, for sisters, your formation is continuous in the sense that you're going back daily for prayer. Like, we go back throughout the day for prayer. We spend like 4 to 5 hours in prayer a day, because we're constantly going back to the source. So that's a bit of our formation, and then everything we're kind of like taught from the side, but that's it. If you don't have that, the training is any other training is useless. It's absolutely, it means nothing. So it can help and enhance, like learning how to listen. There are some like effective tools, so we learn that, but that would never be enough. It's only the presence of Christ that can really transform transform human hearts, can help women actually believe that they are loved because they are receiving that love. They are receiving a supernatural love from you that you're not making on your own. So that's a bit about our formation. And then what does this look like in mission? I'm thinking of 2 stories. How about there's a few stories that I'm thinking of. I can tell one of a particular woman. Oh my gosh, there's so many stories I'm like thinking of. Let me just funnel my thoughts for a second.
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah, so we have, I had the pleasure of serving one woman who, while she was here, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. But while she was here, she was celebrating a big birthday and wasn't terribly excited about it because most women, if they're here, it's because they've been let down and trust has been broken in some way. And, she was just kind of looking back on the year and being like, this isn't where I imagined my life would be. But we were celebrating her birthday, so we made a cake, we had, we had gifts, and we decided to hang some balloons from the ceiling. It was just an inspiration that we had. And as we were just talking with her over dinner and kind of celebrating her life, she started to look at her year in a different way, and she's like, you know what, I think I'm ready to start letting go of a lot of the lies that I've been hanging on to. Like, you know what, I can make this like a moment of my life to let go. And all of a sudden she got really excited and she jumped on the table and grabbed a pen and was like, sisters, what should I let go of? And we were like, and somebody said, like, the lie that you're not good enough. And she goes, the lie that I'm not good enough. And she popped the balloon and the balloon exploded. And she goes, what else? And we're like, that you're not worthy of love. And she goes, that I'm not worthy of love. And bam, she pops the next balloon, it explodes. Her little daughter starts screaming. But she was like on a roll. She was on fire. And we just started naming things. And she started naming things that she had been hanging on to, like, that I can't trust others, like pop, and the balloon would explode. And at the end of it all, all the sisters were on our feet. She was still standing on this table. There's balloon scraps everywhere. We took her daughter into the other room because all the sound was a little overstimulating. But then, there was this profound moment of, I think that's the beauty of what we get to see happen in the heart of a woman here, is that she's given space to hear what her own heart is saying, to hear all the voices that are going on in her head, and to receive the gift of who she truly is. And that it often involves letting go of all the lies that are floating around, and to watch her receive the grace to do that and to express it in a tangible way. I think that was a fruit of living in a home where our mission is simply to love them. Mm-hmm. There's no program here. There's no you have to show up, you have to take this class. Our mission is to love, and our question is, how do we love here? What does she need? And I think it was that love that set her free. So that's a story that I think of often that shows, and that's the again, I think the real beauty in particular of this house is that because the women live with us throughout their pregnancy and in the months after they give birth, they're just given this space that is very similar to the space we're given in prayer, that the Lord gives us in prayer, that we were given during our formation. We're just given space to go deep with the Lord, to ask the questions like, who am I? What makes me beautiful? Do you really love me, Lord? The questions that we're all asking. Do you love me in my weakness? Do you see me as beautiful? Am I trustworthy? All these questions, she's just given space to wrestle it out and to see the fruit of that. And that story kind of illustrates it. I'm sorry, I can talk a lot, so I can pause if you want to add or pause and park the car at a certain comment or something. you mentioned 3 things originally. So I did formation, a story from the mission of what this looks like when you put flesh on it. And there was something else you said, and I forgot. Art night. But do you want to pause before we go into art night?
I think let's keep going. Yeah. And I will say, just for the sake of the interview, I've been referring to our evenings as like creative respite evenings.
Creative respite, I love it. Even better.
So I know it's like art night, it's what it is. But
no.
But if in your response, if you can like kind of remember to say that at certain points, it doesn't have to be every time.
No, absolutely.
That would be helpful for me with just like writing stuff.
Yeah, and it is what it is. It's what we tell them, because that will make sense to them. I don't know if they'll understand what the word creative respite means, but that's at the heart of what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, cool. No, I think, go into that that next level of like how does the formation and kind of like all of what you've been describing fit in with like what we're doing here. Because like another little bit with that, which you've already covered actually, is like to speak a little bit about this home.
Yes.
So maybe we can put those into the same question. So like now building on like how does what you've received flow into like this work that we've been doing, and also what does that mean for this house in particular?
Sure. So I'll backtrack a few steps and say, so we as Sisters of Life, we serve hundreds of women, thousands of women who find themselves in crisis pregnancies. And
where all are you located? Don't make a list, but
so we are in so in Manhattan on our east side is like our main hub. So from there we serve women in the New York area, but also a lot of women from other countries. We serve a lot of women over the phone, through text, but ideally we love to come in and meet them in person, but our sisters are and have served women on the other side of the world who find themselves in a crisis pregnancy and need someone to listen and need a mom, and we're here. But we also have locations in Philly, in Phoenix, Toronto, and we have other missions. So we also we have a retreat house in Connecticut. So it's just a house of prayer where we invite. We do host a lot of women's and young women's retreats. We invite them in to, again, have this space of prayer and to then go back out into the world. But we also have a mission of hope and healing. So that's women who have suffered an abortion or seeking the Lord's healing and mercy. And that is an absolutely beautiful mission. That's also located in the New York area. And then we have this house, which is what we call the Holy Respite mission, which is a fancy way of saying God's house of rest and peace. And there are some women that our sisters are walking with over the phone or in person, and they realize, hey, she might actually flourish by coming to live with us during her pregnancy and after she gives birth. And they keep an ear out for which women would actually flourish in this setting, where it would be a good fit for her, or she needs a place of peace and rest. And then they let us know, and they get her in touch with us. We talk to her, and if on both ends we feel like, hey, this seems to be the Lord's will, then she's welcome to live here. And we can house up to, I think, 8 women. But they come and live with us here in the convent. So we really live religious life, and they work, and they have their space, so they're not asked to be nuns, but they live with us here in the convent. They're welcome to come to prayer, and it's just, I think, ultimately a place of rest and peace, where she can hear her own heart, where we're here to love her and celebrate her and walk with her in this stage of her life. And in the years beyond, so we stay in touch with the women. Throughout the rest of their lives. They become family then. So that's a little bit about this house. And then we've been having these creative respite nights where the women who are living with us are invited to come, and we usually plan a theme for the night, and we give them a space to create. So usually we'll talk a little bit about whatever theme it is. So I'm thinking of the last one, Psalm 139, like you were beautiful and wonderfully made, and giving thanks for the gift of your being and your existence. What else have we done? Letting go was another theme. That was very powerful. So we'll pick a theme. We'll kind of talk a little bit about scripture and give them a starting point, and then we've had different artists like Aaron or Merritt model a work of art for them, share a piece of their own artwork, which kind of gives them permission to be vulnerable and to get the creative juices flowing. And then they're given space to create. It's, I think what I've realized through this is there's something about art that has the capacity to cut to the human heart, almost faster than anything else. Providing this space of creativity allows a woman to get in touch with her heart and express what's on her heart. And then we've created this community where then her heart is received by others. So we share the artwork with each other, and she has the opportunity for her heart, her thoughts, her feelings, her sense of self to be received by others. And I can go into an example of the last one, if that helps.
Yeah.
So the last one was so beautiful. They've all been powerful, but the last one has been particularly on my mind. So we started with this idea of, it was around Thanksgiving, so it was giving thanks, but for the gift of myself. Merritt brought little boxes for each woman to somehow creatively depict her own heart. And it was very open to how to do that. We pulled out a lot of materials, like different fabrics, different paints, different stickers and knickknacks, and pretty much anything. And the women were all given time to artistically depict their heart in some way. And then at the end, we sat and we shared what we created and the meaning behind what we put into it, and gave thanks to the Lord for the gift of our own hearts and our own selves. I'm going to think of a particular example. So one of the women, actually, this was very beautiful. She painted a box for herself and for her daughter, who is 4 months old. But she kind of, on the interior of her daughter's box, she created like this, she painted like what kind of looked like this burst of light, to kind of indicate like the spark of her daughter's life, the newness of her daughter's life, and just kind of like the excitement and anticipation of what's going to be revealed in her daughter's heart. And then for her own, she did a similar thing. I think I can talk about another mother now that I'm thinking of, who she used a lot of images of butterflies and hearts to indicate the transformation that she's experienced, and how much transformation and being made into something beautiful has actually is such an intimate part of who she is. It was in this creative space that, when we all got to share and receive what we had made. And I can share afterwards, I drove one of the women and her daughter home, actually two of the women and their daughters, and in the car ride back, I'll give some context. So this woman has been going through a very challenging time. She's between apartments, really difficult situation, and has just been feeling the realistic heaviness of the challenges of being a single mom and trying to find a home in New York City. And we've been walking her through this with her in this challenging stage of her life. And but driving her in the car back, you you wouldn't know what she was carrying because she was so happy, and she was talking about just how much she knew she was loved and how great God was and how wonderful his plans were. I was convinced driving, I'm like, she is the most joyful person in Manhattan right now. And I was trying to think, what is it? It's not her circumstance. You know, I was dropping her off at a friend's apartment because her friend has taken her in right now. It definitely wasn't that. It wasn't that she has money. She does not that she has a job. She has an injury. Like, there's a lot working against her, but she knows she's loved. She knows she's beautiful. She knows the goodness of her own heart. And it was being able to express that in art, in something tangible. It drew it out of her and allowed her to step into the next day of her challenges with a renewed sense of self, a renewed sense of courage, a renewed sense of God's providence, that she could be joyful in that. And it was the art that facilitated that. It was the ability to create, the space to create, the space to be received in that, and ultimately the space to be loved in that actually is what's carrying her right now. And it's why she can wake up and be grateful for the gift of her life and be grateful for her circumstances and be grateful to be alive and be joyful in that, which was absolutely stunning to watch unfold. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's see.
Sorry, I'm a real talker. If you get me going, I go.
This is all really good material. I'm glad that you're talking a lot. This is really good. Okay, cool. So we talked about the ethos of the Sisters of Life. We talked about this home in particular. We talked about creative respite in the context of this home. Why is it important? What's been impactful about your formation, and also with creative respite. And then my last question, which I think we've already kind of covered, actually, share any stories about experiences or fruits of this series of creative respite nights thus far that women have shared with you or that you've observed. I mean, I guess that can be an opportunity, like if there's anything else that you would like to share that you think would be helpful in this kind of like getting to the meat of why be at the service of life, why be at the service of these women, why incorporate art and beauty into that, and what have been some fruits of that that you've seen or that anyone has shared with you, which you've already talked a little bit about, but I guess this is kind of like a last catch-all question of anything else that you feel inspired to share, or that would also even be kind of like a witness to anyone who's like either in the faith or out of the faith, or in or out of the pro-life movement, to know about like what we've done and about
every human life is sacred. Every human life is sparked with the divine. Every human life has the capacity to be loved beyond our wildest imaginings by God, to become his dwelling place. And that's the spectacular reason for all of existence, was it's just this overflow of God's love. And we just don't know this. We don't know this as a culture. We don't know this as a society. Each person doesn't know this. And in a particular way, these women are at a place in their life where they've been used, they've been used by another. They wouldn't be here if they weren't. where their body has been used as an object and not as a place for the divine, as something sacred, as something worthy of waiting for, as something worthy of reverencing. So they've been suffering in a particular way in this area, but it is actually the gift that God gives in their child that launches them into this space of recognizing what their body was made for, that their body has the capacity to hold and love one another. And in loving their child, it brings them radically into this reality of they are loved by God, and that they're destined for eternity with him, and that they are sacred, and they realize this when they've been given the gift of a life that they didn't create. They're like, I didn't make this. I didn't make this child. They have a personality. They have their own, it's just that they're standing in awe of the mystery of this life that they've been entrusted with. It actually brings them into a sense of their own dignity, in a way that they've just come out of a stage of their life where that has been irreverenced. And I think that's why what we do is so important, and I think that's why art is so important, because art has the capacity to bring souls into the transcendent, to point souls to something higher than just the material of this earth. It uses materials to point to something immaterial, which is extraordinary, that we're all made for something more and for something beautiful. And and art has the capacity to both draw us upward and draw us inward to God dwelling within and God leading us intimately and personally within, because it creates, for the artist, it creates space, to answer that question. I love the question that Saint Francis of Assisi would ask. It was the way he prayed. He would say, "Who are you, Lord, and who am I? Who are you, Lord, who am I?" And I think that's the question of every human heart. Who is God and who am I? Who is God and who am I? We're all longing to know, who am I? Who am I in his eyes, and who is God? And in some ways they're the same question. They're different questions and they're the same question. Because the more we realize who God is, the more we come into ourselves, and the more we actually come into who we really are, the more we encounter God. And art creates a space for this to happen, and for us to reflect on this, and for us to enter into this, because it's not about like creating a product or creating a material or creating something we can sell or making our own identity. It's a space of receiving the gift of ourselves, receiving the gift of God as our Father and Creator. And for reasons I don't know if I could explain, art has a particular capacity to do this over logic and reasoning, over book learning. It just, maybe it's somehow entering into the very heart of God, the Creator himself, that like pulls us into the Trinity. And then pulls us into who we are and what our purpose is and why we were created and why life is exciting and joyful and stunning. So I guess I would say all of that. And then the fruits of this are, again, this I think every human heart is restless. St. Augustine would say, our hearts are restless until we rest in you. The human heart of our modern age is looking to find rest in who we are. There's so much question of identity, and how do I make my own identity? How do I discover what that is? But art has the capacity to lead someone to encounter the Creator and to encounter their very true selves. And it's there that the human heart finds the rest that they're looking for. So the fruit of this is greater self-realization, and a direct fruit that keeps coming to mind is deeper communion. So after the art nights, I've had continuing conversations with mothers about things that the women that lived here, and with other sisters about things that they shared through their artwork. one woman was sharing about when we did the art night about letting go. She created like this wire sculpture piece that had that you could slide onto her fingers, and it represented what she was gripping and what she was holding on to. And the wire, one of the strands of the wire that hung out from the piece that goes over the hand was like tangled in a knot, and she was talking about how this knot is frustrating and this relationship is holding her back. And I didn't know that she was carrying this, or it hadn't been like revealed in that way, and to receive her in that space, and then for her to turn and say, "What did you create, sister?" And to share like, "Oh, I'm stepping into this relationship and it feels new and awkward," and for us to mutually share hearts creates this deep space of communion. And what was surprising to me too was it wasn't just between the mothers living here. It wasn't just between like mothers and sisters, but even between sisters. It's led us to a deeper space of communion with each other, where we're going like deeper than just the surface of our day in and day out, but really talking about sharing in vulnerability, what's on our hearts, what's bringing us joy, what do we see as the graces the Lord's revealing in our hearts. So communion, I would say the two fruits are that I see as most noticeable is a deepened awareness of self and God at the same time, and a deepening communion. I can say with certainty that it has deepened our community life, between sisters and mothers, between everyone living in this house who has participated in this, is sharing more vulnerably with one another and being received more vulnerably, and that creates a communion that our world is desperate for because we were made for it. This night has created a space for that and a means for that to take place.
Mm.